Hello and welcome, everybody. SF Live episode 187 this morning. And I'm joined by none other than Richard Clark. He's CEO of Orca Gold. I'm quite excited to be chatting with him because lots happening in Sudan in particular. And really curious to get an update from him, what's happening on the ground and how they're progressing with their project in Sudan. But before I switch over to Rick and be reminded, you of course know that already, this is an interactive format, so this is made for you. So make sure to use the hashtag function AskORG on Twitter or use the YouTube chat and make sure to get your questions in there as well. We'll be monitoring that chat and Twitter, of course, at the same time while we're chatting with Rick. So make sure you get your questions in and we'll get them answered and sprinkled in during the discussion. Also, don't forget to follow us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, hit that like and subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on the notifications as well. As we do all our interviews live, you do have a bit of a head start and a bit of an advantage if you watch us live, because that will send you push notifications either to your browser if you have that enabled or to your phone's to your screen on the phone. So make sure to use that. I think it is to your advantage. Now, without further ado, I've said enough. Let me switch over to my guest, Rick. Thanks so much for joining us. It's good to see you. How are you?
Good, thanks, Kai. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no worries. Before we get started, we got lots prepared to talk about, actually. Give us a quick rundown on Orca Gold. It's the first time you're on SF Live. I'm really excited to have you on, but give us a quick overview.
Sure. Well, obviously, as you sort of foreshadowed, Orca Gold, its primary asset is located in Sudan. We've been here for quite a while. I think that somebody pointed out to me today that, in actual fact, we've been looking at Sudan for about almost like 10 years. Orca became Orca here in about 2013, and you fast forward to now, 8 years later, we've taken a barren piece of desert in the northern part of Sudan and turned it into, a substantial mining development project. And, we're pretty excited over that period of time, not only discovering the project itself, the continued upside, and also the political developments in Sudan. I mean, coming into these countries, coming into these jurisdictions, you have to make a call on where you think things are going to go. And you only do this type of thing if you think that the resource potential justifies, obviously, the political risk. Now, we don't take personal security risk. We were very, very comfortable with Sudan from that front. We've got a long history in our group in Sudan and in the region. But we did take political risk. So, I'm happy to sit here in front of you today and tell you that has paid off in a very, very large way for us. And the current government of Sudan is 100% behind us and supportive, which now allows us to go ahead very, very quickly to develop the project.
Okay. There's lots to talk about, especially the update you just mentioned, the changes that are happening in Sudan and the global perception of Sudan as well. Massive changes happening and coming, of course, as well. Let's stay on the history of the project for a minute longer. You took over the project in 2013. Run us through the history, like how long... or what is the history of the project, and like run us through the different stages, and now what stage are you in right now? And yeah.
Well, when I say Orca took it over, it was always us. It's just that Orca was the public vehicle we used. Up until that point in time, we were here in Sudan looking at things privately. Originally, the original private company that we used in Sudan was funded privately by Lucas LUNDIN and I, just the two of us. And we made the decision to come here, but because of the political perception, we didn't want to bring any of our other investors or people into it until we had a much better idea what was going on here. So we came here into Sudan, and I say here at the moment because I'm joining you from Khartoum at the moment in Sudan. We came here and spent some time getting to know the place, getting to know Khartoum again, and then we heard that there was a massive gold rush going on in the north. And we sent our exploration people, technical people up there at the time, and they discovered that was true. Make a long story short, we were able to acquire a concession from a local businessman, the concession called Block 14. And we proceeded very quickly to look at it from a recce exploration perspective, discovered what is now GSS, and we then took our private company, rolled it into Orca, and the rest we then carried forward as
Okay.
Orca.
Now, and one thing I'm trying to understand is also timeline of development, right? Like, or to that decision to build now. It's like, it's always curious. Like people say, well, it takes 10 years, 15 years, 20 years to get from, let's say, discovery to mine, right? So when was that? When did you go to Khartoum first? And like, put a year on it. I'm trying to get a grasp on that.
Okay, well, look, in terms of Block 14, that really became something in 2012, mid-year 2012. Okay, um, so you look at it today; it's 9 years later. Okay, but when people talk about exploration, and how long it takes to build a mine, they're usually talking about jurisdictions like North America, South America, and in every pretty much across the board today, in those jurisdictions, you're not going to go to anywhere and find a virgin prospect, something that has had nothing done to it, or that there's no maps, geological or even reasonable topographic. And that's the case with Sudan. Sudan's been basically a development wasteland, an economic wasteland for almost 30 years because of its political situation. So when we got there, there was no information. You didn't go to your local Ministry of Mines and find maps. Didn't really exist. So we created this opportunity from nothing based on our assessment of artisanal activity in the area, and then building our own crews, and away we went. So, to give you an idea of the prospectivity of the area, the first zone we did significant work on and drilled, the first drill hole was the discovery hole. So that's the potential, and that's the reason we came here in the first place, was to try to see if that potential actually existed. So now you look and you say, okay, you discover this from nothing, and here we are 9 years later. Keep in mind that we've been basically sitting back watching for the last 2 years as the political climate, basically developed here, the new one. And in that 2 year period of time-ish, we have not done any physical work on the ground to speak of. It's all been either detailed engineering or, getting ready or talking to potential investors and watching the politics. So here we are ready to build it. There's been a feasibility study, a revised feasibility study. The project's fully permitted. We've got everything we need from the government to go ahead and build it, subject to the final mining lease document, and that we've accomplished. Back out the 2 years, all of that in 7 years. For me to do the same thing in North America today would probably take me 15.
And that's what I was trying to highlight as well, because like my next point was, yes, news flow has been slower while you have been waiting to develop, or for the region to develop. But I think 7 years from discovery to feasibility study to production decision, and now hopefully soon production financing and construction, it's going to be it's actually not a bad time frame, despite having to wait almost 2 years. Right. You mentioned the feasibility study, and I want to stay on that for a second here before we switch over to like next steps and what's upcoming here for the company. Run us through the key highlights real quick, and maybe some levers you can pull, and something you would personally like to optimize yourself.
Okay, look, the feasibility study, as we've discussed before, the timing of the feasibility study, if I was in complete control of the situation, we probably would have waited another year or so and kept drilling, because we were having lots of success with drilling. But we were under a lot of pressure from the government of Sudan to get going. They want to see they want to see a big commercial gold mine built. And we're, let's put it this way, the sharp end of the stick of mining in Sudan. In other words, with our success comes greater success. And it's one of these things, build it and they will come. And I think that's a truism for this part of the world. So we agreed, and we stopped exploration and started our feasibility work somewhat prematurely. Some people would crossed our fingers to some degree, and yet ended up with an amazing study with amazing economics. That was proved up even further when we did the detailed engineering and delivered the final feasibility study at the end of 2020. So, we're sitting here, and what makes this project unique, Kai, is that compared to a lot of our peers in the area, is it's an open pit project, mineralization from surface, There's no pre-strip. The internal strip or deposit strip is about 1.4 to 1, which is a open pit dream. And more importantly, this project is a high-grade core. And the high-grade core is, we didn't really appreciate the full extent of that core until we completed the detailed engineering. But the high-grade core as it sits now is about 2 million ounces of 2 grams. And that is what we're focused on in the first 5 to 7 years of mining. Now that we're back on the ground in a serious way, we are going to commence exploration where we left off. And we will be drilling that high-grade core further, looking to see exactly how large, what is the real extent of it, applying different economic parameters to the model. And at the same time, we haven't been completely idle on exploration. We've identified probably 20, 25 targets on our now 1,000 square kilometer license that we're ready to go back and either test again or test for the first time. So we're very excited about that. And the other aspects of the project are that are key and again sets us apart: all-in sustaining cost, operating costs, just the general logistics generally of it. It's just a incredibly solid economic project. And when you look at the fact that we ran the financials at 1350, gold looks like it's going to go to 2000 if we look at the last couple of weeks. You run our numbers at 2000 and it's staggering.
No, it's one of those number crunching exercises. You put it in an Excel sheet, it doesn't sound real anymore, right? It's exponential growth and IRR returns and stuff like that. It's fantastic. Couple things just from the feasibility study. You mentioned up to year 5 or 7, you'll be producing from the high grade core. And the production guide, or I wouldn't say guidance, but the outline production scenario is 230,000 ounces a year for up to year 7. And then it drops off. Sounds negative, but we're still looking at 170,000 ounces a year. Is the goal of the exploration program to fill that gap, to bring that even, let's say, year 7, 8, 9, 10 to up to 200,000 ounces? Is that the opportunity you're looking at, or what are you looking for itself, or are you just looking to add a cherry on top of the whole exploration program to hand it off to the next person? Say, okay, there's a lot more.
No, you got to look at the mine plan. And the way the feasibility study is designed, it's 5 to 7 years of high grade, okay? And so we're mining lower grade material, but we're just not putting it through the plant. So that's being stockpiled for that period of time. Once the dimension of the high grade area now, as I told you, the high grade zone that we identified under the feasibility study takes us to 7 years. We're very, very confident the drilling we're going to do now is going to expand that. And we'll just continue to mine and process more high grade and stockpile low grade for a later day. At the same time, you got to remember where we are logistically. We're in the middle of a desert. Okay, so we're looking at targets now anywhere up to 100 kilometers away potentially. Look and focusing obviously at grade that we can truck into the project, irrespective of the main zones that we have right now. So my guess from the various mines I've been involved in building in the past, I guess a good example, we'd focus on something like Chirano, which when I built it, had an 8-year mine life. And we started construction, it started production in about 2004. Here we are, 2021, and it's still doing pretty well. So that's the way these things work. And as I said, the prospectivity of this area is very large. There's going to be a mine here for a long, long time producing a lot of gold.
No, you're not just drilling to increase the feasibility study itself, like to shine it up and polish it up a bit, right? So great. I think we've set the scene now, right? Okay, we talked about the basics, the history of the project. We talked about the feasibility study. Now it's go time, right? And we've been hearing a lot of positive news out of Sudan and worldwide about Sudan as well. And you were recently in Paris. Why don't you fill us in? What did you do in Paris? What was happening in Paris? I think it was the Friends of Sudan conference. So,
yes, I mean that's Friends of Sudan were part of the whole thing. It was sponsored by the government of France and Macron, the president, and it was done through an international agency that does financial conferences. Based in France, okay, and What happened here is I got a call from the Canadian ambassador to Sudan, and said he had received a call from the French ambassador to Sudan, requesting and hoping that Orca Gold would come and present our project at the French conference. So I was asked by both the French and Canadian governments to participate, and basically we found out that we were the only private mining project that was going to be highlighted at the conference, and I'd be sitting on a panel with the likes of General Electric and Siemens and such others, and I went, okay, this is a great opportunity. At the same time, the Sudanese government came to me, and we're very excited that we were going to be there and presenting. So off we went. It was a interesting challenge in COVID times, but we got there. It worked extremely well. The conference was a huge success for France and Sudan, in the sense of the participation by both the, international banks, government bodies, and the private investment sector. And what I can tell you is, since that conference, our contact list and interest has increased exponentially.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's glad to.
So a big success.
Just made me think of the scene in Bora, like huge success.
Huge success.
No, fantastic. But it also meant a lot for Sudan, as you mentioned. I think that's important to point out, because it's part of how the political climate is changing about Sudan as well. Do you want to fill us in on the debt relief packages that have been granted to Sudan and how this is moving forward now, moving the country forward?
Yeah, okay. Look, I think, as most people will know, Sudan experienced a revolution in 2019 that toppled, a military dictatorial Islamic fundamentalist regime that had been in power for almost 30 years. That government, drove Sudan to a wasteland, and certainly an international pariah status. And Sudan was subject to sanctions by just about every Western country, the UN, you name it, and the economy was crippled. And the people of Sudan were fed up and tired. And what we saw in 2019 was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back, and ended up in a peaceful protest of the people of Sudan, which is unbelievable for this part of the world when you think of it. And it was very Gandhi-esque. Okay, so it was hundreds of thousands of people descending on the capital and the government military structure, and saying enough's enough, and we're not moving until something's fixed. It didn't go without hiccups. Don't get me wrong. The government at the time reacted badly, and people were killed. But that basically pushed the populace and the military, quite frankly, over the edge. The military abandoned the then government, arrested them, and we move forward with what we have now, which is a transitional government towards democracy. That government has been now recognized by the world, particularly all the major powers, and substantially and importantly, their creditors. So, the big change. So what's happened is, we've been watching this process for the last couple of years, obviously, and wondering where this is all going to go. I can tell you, you probably couldn't get a better result for a company like ours. And the government now has done so many things, so many changes that have been positive, and I can't even really begin to list them. But other to say that those changes have resulted in the removal of all sanctions from Sudan, economic sanctions, removal of Sudan from the U.S. list of state sponsors of terror at the end of last year, which completely opened up the economy and allowed Sudan to reach out and say to the world, help us with our debt issue, help us with our economy, and help us rebuild Sudan to what it was over 30 years ago, which is one of the largest economies in Africa. So we fast forward to, and a key factor of all of this, Kai, that people seem to miss a little bit in the West, was the other thing they did was they struck a very successful peace treaty. And that peace treaty was with the majority of the various rebel groups in Sudan that were active against the former regime. So the transitional government, backed by the West, convinced these rebel groups to come into the fold and be part of government. And that took place effectively a couple of months ago, we realized that process. The government was restructured, a new cabinet, and that new cabinet is made up of a lot of the rebel factions, as is the Sovereign Council. And to give you an idea, the new Minister of Mines, who is a very competent man, I'm very impressed with him, was part of the rebel side of the thing. So those things all together have allowed the Sudan to reach out to the world legitimately and say, we're a unified Sudan, help us. And that culminated in Paris. Okay. And what happened in Paris was amazing. With the assistance of the United States, and I'm just now talking financial assistance, the United States, France, Great Britain, okay, Saudi Arabia, we've seen huge, huge economic announcements being made that have helped Sudan. Now, the arrears of their debt with major institutions like the World Bank and the IMF have been paid off, and now we're seeing monies flow from those organizations to Sudan as being in their capacity or in their categories of one of the most distressed states in the world. So their economy is going to be bolstered coming up this month now. I think we're going to see and more focused on the private debt side. And I think you're going to see that a lot of forgiveness and a lot of things are going to happen that are going to be beneficial to Sudan again. So we have certainly been now contacted in discussions with a lot of those groups that could not talk to us before this. And so it's working very well.
Fantastic. And I have to ask you to get some commentary on that. But Africa Intelligence reported that you're about to sign a $300 million deal with Hamdok, who's the prime minister of Sudan right now. Do you care to elaborate on that article? Is there more to it?
I love the press. In some ways, I love to sit back and read what people say about what we do and what's going to happen. And, it's incredibly entertaining. What that article is correct on is what we're financing is $320 million. And we are in discussions with the government on that on many fronts with them. Were we going to the government and they giving us $320 million or us announcing we've closed $320 million? The answer is no. Okay, so where we are is as we've disclosed to the market previous, and we will be giving an update in the next couple of days. We're very advanced on our discussions on financing. They have accelerated in a very large way since the beginning of the year. That acceleration has picked up since Paris. People that we could not talk to or could not invest in Sudan now can. And everybody's now having a look at this project and going, this is probably one of the best financeable projects in Africa. And if all the world's coming in to assist Sudan and prepared to take this kind of risk, why wouldn't we? So it's a change that we've been hoping for, and that's the discussions I was having with the government.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I got to drill down just a little bit, just a little more color, because after the development decision, the government's going to own 20% of the project and a local partner 10%, according to your slide. Does that mean they will contribute equally to the build? So is it fair to assume that out of Sudan you can expect $100 million for the build? Is that a fair assumption?
Okay. No, this isn't like people might compare this to something like Eritrea. No, this is not the case. The interest, the 10%, 20% interests are carried, quasi-carried, and they have been since day one. And all that means is we get to recover our investment on a preferential basis as against paying dividends.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, no, I wanted to clarify that because I saw that in the presentation, so figured I'd ask. News flow. Let's talk news flow. What do you expect coming up? You said you're going to start drilling. Do you have more of a timeline there?
Look, as we explained, you and I talked a little bit off camera before. Because with the decision to go ahead and start, one of the things we're working with the government right now is the relocation of artisanal miners off our main resources for safety reasons. The securing of the site, we will be putting fences around the resources. The fences will eventually extend to the mining lease itself, the airstrip. It's all about safety. There's camel herds in the area. There's lots of artisanal miners, and that is our priority right at the moment. In conjunction with that, as we could get into we're in the middle of the process now. We're looking at a couple of weeks to complete it, whereupon we'll be going back in with a number of initiatives, both the commencement of the construction of a permanent camp, exploration, as I said, restarting. We are going to define the initial two resources, which is what we call Galat Surface South and Wadi Doom. On surface, getting ready, we will identify reserve drilling about 2 years ahead of, obviously you got to have about 2 years ahead of production. So we'll be doing that. And all throughout this process, we'll be looking to finalize our financing discussions to go forward to then be able to order long-term lead items, the mills, et cetera, et cetera.
Pre-construction, you mentioned the airstrip, and you are doing some pre-construction work already. Like, run us through the process there. Like, what is part of the pre-construction, and like, does the cash like suffice for that part?
Yeah, look, the issue here is as quickly as we can. Obviously, we're not interested in Band-Aid equity raises. We're now looking at very large financing options. And though that being said, we're in a very fortunate position. I mean, you can appreciate that it's been tough from a general market perspective to fund Orca over the years. The reason this was possible, Orca is a public company, but for all intents and purposes, it actually operates somewhat privately because, the general public market was looking at Sudan and going, ew. And because we have the shareholder base that we do, being able to go forward with this, we put a lot of our own personal money into it. I'm very fortunate to have, partners in this like Lucas Lundin and Ross Beatty and others. And so we've been able to fund when we need to, and if we had to, we could still do that. So, and that's been, an advantage we have over our peers in this regard. So that's allowed us to raise a treasury that, permits us to go ahead with pre-development type stuff, pre-construction stuff, which is what we're doing. As you said, the airstrip is incredibly important because right now it's a 14-hour drive from Khartoum to site. We do it in 2 days. We don't drive at night, so that reduces optionality a bit. And it's a paved road within 4 hours of site, but it's one paved road with all the trucking and everything else for that region going through it. So we're looking to make our life a lot easier by building that airstrip. And of course, when we're in production of gold, we're going to need the airstrip to fly the gold out. So that's what's happening on that front. We also now, because, as we get into peak construction, we'll have about 1,500 people on site. So we have to start the camp process and get that and start doing infrastructure like roads and security and things like I mentioned. And that's all in the works as we speak. So we'll be branching out with different exploration targets. As we update the market on that, you're going to see some of the numbers that we achieved from our former exploration work, and we'll be going back and focusing on those plus new targets. So we're pretty excited with where we're going now.
Yeah, we're just at the cusp of success. That's what I called the video, like gold stock on the cusp of success, meaning start of construction and going into production, right? Fantastic. I'm quite excited to hear more about news flow, upcoming exploration, pre-construction work, financing, a lot of catalysts on the horizon. Rick, I really appreciate you joining us this morning. Thanks so much. Or your evening, actually. What time is it in Khartoum?
It is now 7:30 p.m. at night in Khartoum, and it was 44 degrees today.
Brutal. I think it's going to reach 23 here in Vancouver today. So sunny, though. We'll take that.
Good.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
You can take that.
I'll appreciate it. Rick, it was fantastic for you to join us. We should do an update in a couple months once we have some more site or line of sight on financing and construction and timelines on that. Really appreciate coming on, and good luck.
Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Everybody else,
have a great day.
This was SF Live episode 187 with Rick Clark of Orca Gold. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, and hit that little like and subscribe button as well. Turn on the bell notifications because we do all our interviews live. That way you do have a bit of an advantage over just our replay friends. So make sure to use that, and we'll be back with more updates very, very